Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the live feed tonight where we are talking about building the confidence and overcoming anxiety in the rider. So I'm getting a few messages coming through right now where people are asking me where they can find the live feed and that sort of thing. So what happens with these live feeds, and I'll explain it now because obviously every Monday we're going to be doing it at 7 o'clock. So what happens is, as long as you're on Facebook and as long as you're a follower of the Tanja Kraus Horsemanship page, what should happen is that Facebook should come up as a little notification, and it should say to you, Tanja Kraus Horsemanship is now live, and you'll be able to click on that link and you'll be able to come in. So hopefully that's happening for you all now, and I can see people starting to come in and be live. So hi everyone that's starting to join now, and I can see the thumbs up, so that's really appreciated. It's really helpful to know that people are watching. That's really great. And what you should also be seeing now on your Facebook feed, I just saw Jane, Ellie, thank you very much. Jane, hi, how are you? What should also be happening now is that you should be able to see a little button somewhere on your Facebook that'll say invite people. So if you know someone that would be interested in this topic, go ahead and click, hey Beth, everyone's talking about my hair. If you should be able to see a little button that'll say invite people, and you should be able to start inviting your friends. And if you know anyone, please do so. Go ahead and click that button, and I'll wait probably about a minute or so just to let everyone get settled and make sure that they're in a comfortable place and make sure they can see and all that sort of stuff. So we'll just talk for a minute now and see everyone rolling in and joining and that sort of stuff. And I'm really looking forward to this talk because it is something that I see quite often. And I think it's probably something that nearly every horse person or horse rider has encountered at some stage, whether at a huge level or at a mild level of anxiety. Somewhere along the line, if you've spent enough time with horses, you've probably had a negative experience in some way. You've fallen off, or you've been scared by the horse or something like that. Beth is saying, where's the button? Oh, there, Jane's answering. Thank you, because I don't know. I can't actually see what you guys can see because all I can see is the live feed. So if you spend enough time with horses, you've probably experienced some kind of negative experience in some way because, they are a live animal and they're pretty big and they're pretty unpredictable at times. And most of us sometimes, hey Mark, you have probably fallen off or something like that. So depending on when it was and what their circumstances were and all that sort of stuff, we can carry a little bit of baggage in that regard. And for some of us, it can be really huge. I've met a lot of people that have almost given up horses, that have almost given up horses and almost given up riding and all that sort of stuff. And that's hopefully not where you end up, but I know that a lot of people have come pretty close because it can be really, really scary. So what I'm hoping to share with you tonight are some of the tools and techniques. And so I want to welcome you all, and I really appreciate it. I can see the comments and things like that coming up, and I really do appreciate you guys commenting, and I will try and address all of them, but I'm only sort of getting 3 at a time, so they sort of roll over. So I might not be able to say everyone's name and things like that, but please know that I do really appreciate that you're here and that you're watching. So welcome, and I hope I give you some valuable information this evening. The second thing that I want to talk about is the fact that I have experienced, a negative experience, so to speak, myself. So I can empathize with people that may be feeling anxiety now or that may be fearful now and things like that. Please don't think that I don't understand, because I certainly have experienced certain things with my horses, and even my horse Cooper has. When I first started him under saddle, he smoked me really badly, and I was scared for quite a long time. So I do empathize, and I do understand what it feels like to be really sort of gripped with not wanting to go out and get on that horse. And I do understand that it can carry on to other horses. And I also understand that it can be from having a really big break from horses. I talk to a lot of people that may have ridden when they were younger and then, got married, had a family, things like that. Life gets busy and then we come back to horses and, we're not as young, we're not as bouncy as we used to be, so to speak. And it can be pretty scary when you first start getting back into the saddle. So I can empathize with you. I do want to say I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, but I have helped a lot of people. And if you guys are on the feed, there's a few of you that have been really majorly worried about getting back into horses or worried about getting on your horses, and I know that we have been hugely successful in getting you guys back on, and we've got you out working in the field of horses, cantering your horses down the trail, all that sort of stuff. So please feel free to comment in the comments about how this has helped you, because that's exactly what I'm going to share this evening, some of the tips and techniques that I've shared with people to get them back on their horses. I did have a comment earlier today from Nikki who was talking about jumping. So she's just got a new horse, and I think that she's probably okay with handling him, and I think she's probably okay with just riding him in flat work, but she's got a little bit of anxiety when it comes to thinking about show jumping. So she'll be able to apply those techniques to even the show jumping arena. I've spoken to a lot of people in the past that are fine with riding and training and all that sort of stuff, and it's the competition arena that sets them off. So whilst I probably won't be able to talk about those, every individual scenario this evening, what I will be sharing with you is a method that you should be able to adapt to your situation. And please feel free to contact me and send me messages and things like that, and I will try and adapt the program for you if you're sort of writing it down. I am going to share with you a information sheet for anyone who wants it. You can send your email through and I'll send you an information sheet on everything that we talk about this evening. So if you're sort of having trouble adapting it to your personal situation, feel free to send me a message and I'll do the best I can to help you adapt it to your situation and get you back to where you're wanting to be with your horse. So the first step in building confidence and overcoming anxiety is acknowledging the issue. So I'm sure that a lot of people that are watching this feed are sort of like, yeah, I'm totally acknowledging the issue because I'm here, I'm watching the feed, I want the information. But there's probably a few people sitting at home that might be like, I do meet people who say to me, I'm not scared, I don't have any fear when it comes to the horse, but it's the horse. The horse is scary. The horse has done this to me, etc., etc. So step number one is to acknowledge that you yourself personally may have an issue with confidence or may have an issue with anxiety when it comes to riding or doing whatever it is that you want to do. I'm not saying that I don't meet horses that are troubled or things like that, and we can certainly help the horse in those areas, but 9 times out of 10 when I meet a horse that's troubled, the owner is troubled as well, even if the owner hasn't acknowledged that within themselves yet. So step number one is to acknowledge, I do have a fear around this, or I do have an issue when it comes to my horse, and I want to take some steps to get along and get better. So the first thing that I always say to people in my courses is to make friends with your fear. I meet a lot of people who will say to me, I hate it. I'm scared and it's stupid. It's so stupid that I'm scared. I shouldn't be scared. And the first thing that I say to people is, it's not stupid. As modern human beings, we don't face the challenges that our ancestors faced when it comes to survival. But our fear is a leftover instinct from when we needed to sleep with one eye open to make sure that we weren't going to, get eaten in the middle of the night or something like that. So the first thing to do is to make friends with your fear and acknowledge that your fear is actually keeping you safe. Your fear is self-preservation. That's what fear is designed to do. It's to alert you to danger. It's to alert you to say, hey, there's something wrong. This doesn't feel right. How about we assess the situation and not go further until we're comfortable with the situation? So rule number one, or step number one, is to acknowledge the issue. Step number two is to make friends with your fear. Stop using negative words and stop beating yourself up when it comes to being fearful. It's not serving you. It's not going to help you get better. You can call yourself stupid or pathetic, or, I've heard a million words for people to describe themselves for being scared, and none of that being negative is going to help you. Rule number two is make friends with your fear. Say, yep, I know why my fear's here. It's for self-preservation. I've had a negative experience in the past, for example. I've had a negative experience in the past. It's perfectly fine for me to feel fearful about this situation because my experience has been negative. It's perfectly fine, even if you haven't had a negative experience, say you have had a break and now you have children, it's perfectly fine for you to say, now I have small people that are relying on me being well to take care of them. It's perfectly normal for me to be afraid, or more afraid, of my own safety than it has been in the past. Okay, that's completely normal. So make friends with your fear, acknowledge it, and say, it's there to do me a favor. It's there to keep me safe because I have experienced something in the past, or because I have young people, or I've got a family, or I've got responsibilities. As we all get older, we all have greater responsibilities. The bank probably isn't going to appreciate you ringing up and saying, oh, I can't pay my mortgage for 6 months because I fell off a horse. The bank's really not going to care about that situation, or they're not going to be that empathetic about that situation. So it's perfectly normal for you to have a fear surrounding a potentially dangerous situation. Number two, I have already touched base on this. Be kind to yourself. Thank you, Ellie Mae. I really appreciate that. Yes, I do. And sometimes I don't iron my shirts. Be kind to yourself and change your words. I just touched base on that. Using negative words and putting yourself down. I'm so stupid. It's pathetic. I shouldn't feel this way. Using shouldn'ts and wouldn'ts and things like that. It isn't helping. So what I like to say to people is talk to yourself the way that you would talk to a small child. If a small child came up to you and said, I'm frightened about getting on that horse, I don't think that you would say, you're an idiot for being scared of getting on that horse. I think you would say to that small child, hopefully you would try to encourage that child, or you would try and talk to that child about their fear, and you would try and understand where they were coming from. You would try and have empathy in regards to that situation. So you need to talk to yourself the same way that you would talk to a child. It's not going to serve you. It's not going to get you... it's not going to help your situation to just put yourself down. That just gets you further away from getting on the horse rather than closer to it. Invest time in talking about it. So if you are struggling with getting on the horse or going to a competition or things like that, what I recommend is that you do find someone who is going to have a kind and understanding ear to listen to your situation. It's not going to be beneficial to talk to someone who is either very close to you and doesn't understand the horse world. So don't go and talk to your partner or your mother if they're going to shriek and say, I never want you to get on a horse again, when you tell them that you've fallen off, because it's not going to help the situation. They're going to feed that anxiety and that lack of confidence that you already have. You need someone who's going to remain objective and not put you down. So on one end of the scale, you've probably got close friends or family that don't understand horse riding and are going to be worried, and they're going to discourage you from moving on and getting back on the horse. They're going to say, it's too dangerous, you shouldn't do that. on the top end of the scale, where you've got experienced horse people, you may encounter people that are going to say, don't be ridiculous. Why would you be scared of that? Everybody falls off. You know what the rule is: when you fall off the horse, you get back on. That hard line's not going to help you either, especially when you're feeling a lack of confidence or anxiety. So you really need someone in the middle that's going to be objective, and you need to talk through your experience and what's happened to you in the past, because that's the first step in moving on from a situation. So even if that means seeking professional help, there's nothing wrong with making an appointment with a therapist or someone like that who is professional, who is going to remain objective, and they're actually going to talk you through what your feelings are and what your experiences have been and why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. I've had this conversation with a few people before, and they'll say to me, oh, don't be ridiculous, I'm not going to go to therapy just because I fell off a horse. And yet if someone has a car accident and they say, whoa, that really scared me, I'm going to go and talk to someone about it, most of us would probably be like, oh, that's a good idea, you need to go and talk about it. Well, a car accident and a horse accident can be just as traumatic as the other. Neither can be worse or better or whatever than the other. And in fact, a horse is clearly has its own mind and has its own thought pattern and things like that. So it can be a lot more difficult to recover from a horse, because a horse is a thinking being. So you need to go back to that horse and try and communicate with that horse, and so on and so forth. And that's obviously, that's often where a lot of the trauma comes from, is that you've experienced this situation with a thinking being that you couldn't communicate with or control at the time. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because I'm just seeing so Beth is saying, if there's been a fall and there's no serious injury, do you think it is beneficial to get back on? I'm going to say it would depend on the situation. I have encouraged people in the past, if they have come off the horse and they are uninjured and the horse is uninjured and we're in a safe space, I do encourage people to get back on the horse and breathe and wait until their heart rate lowers, and wait until they're in a state that is calm and confident before they dismount. I have a belief that if your final experience with a horse is that you fall, your heart rate's up, you're in an anxious situation, your adrenaline's pumping, and that's when you finish the situation, that's your last memory. So your body and your brain is going to be saying, that was my last memory, that is the most significant experience that I have had in recent times with a horse. So if it's possible, if it's safe, if no one's injured, even if someone else is holding the horse and you can get back on and just breathe and lower your heart rate and be comfortable, give him a rub and get back off and then take all the gear off, yes, I think that's beneficial to the situation. And then the next day or whenever it's suitable, you can go ahead and come back and proceed. So then we come to reality check. So this is another step in the sequence of events. A reality check means that the older we get, the bigger the fish. So I meet a lot of people that may have had, you're welcome, I meet a lot of people that may have had poor experiences in the past, and you might talk to someone who was there, and you might talk to the person who fell off, and the person who fell off, often their recollection of events is a lot bigger and a lot more traumatic than the person who was watching. And this is a normal human Nav, I can't answer that. I don't know why I'm breaking up. I haven't had anyone else say that, so maybe it's your Wi-Fi. It could be mine. I don't know. What normally happens is a normal human experience or condition or whatever you want to call it to make the fish bigger. I like to say the older you get, the bigger the fish. So your stories get more dramatic and they get more complex, and all of a sudden there's all these extra details that weren't there when you first recalled the story and all this sort of thing. And it's not because you're lying or you want to make up stories, but the brain starts to add all these extra things because it's sort of like mind games with yourself. So I think what we need to do is sit down and have a real reality check about the situation, because what often will happen is someone will say to me, or I'll see it or whatever, a horse will jump and the horse will just jump to the side and the person's fallen off, and 2 weeks later you'll run into that person and they'll say, oh, when he bucked me off, and you'll go, no, he didn't buck you off. That didn't actually happen. And it's not any kind of like I say, the person's not trying to lie or anything like that. It's just a natural human coping mechanism to add details and add stories and add extra things, which makes it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger in our minds. And all of a sudden we've had this huge traumatic experience, when the reality is, okay, the horse had a look at something, I wasn't paying attention, or a kangaroo jumped out of the bush and the horse shied and I plopped off, and then the horse ran, and so on and so forth. So I think a reality check on the situation, and really being a little bit, taking a hard line with yourself and saying, okay, what really happened? And you can even write it down, and that's going to help you process and move beyond the experience, because that's all we're trying to do, is move beyond the experience. Acknowledge it. We're not trying to ignore it or not think about it. Some of us take the opposite. We'll not think about it. And not thinking about it means that it's still in here somewhere, but we just haven't acknowledged it and we haven't processed it yet. So to actually sit down and write out the facts can sometimes really help us process what's occurred, why it occurred, and then we can go ahead and move on. Another thing to think about when you're doing that is, what do you focus on when you tell that story? It's important to acknowledge what your brain is thinking the problem was. When you tell the story, is it the horse's fault? Is it your fault? Is it somebody else's fault? Or was it a genuine accident? If you're blaming yourself or the horse, primarily the horse, if you're blaming the horse for the situation, that can be a huge obstacle in regards to us moving on with that horse, and even with future horses. Because if we can go through our entire lives blaming a horse for a situation, then our brain's telling us that if that horse was capable of hurting us, then any future horse can be capable of hurting us. Where what we need to do is go back and say, well, was the horse actually trying to hurt me? Or was the horse spooking at something that he was scared of? Was he trying to save himself? And was I just a unfortunate bystander, or an unfortunate rider that got caught up in those events? We always have to empathize with the horse in that situation and think, if the horse bucked, why did he buck? Was he bucking at another horse? Was he bucking because he got scared? Was he bucking because the saddle didn't fit, or whatever? It doesn't matter what the reason was, but if we're just simply blaming the horse and saying the horse did that to me, that is going to be a huge blockage in our ability to move forward and ride any future horses, because our brains are going to be protecting us. Fear is protection. Our brains are going to be protecting us from having that experience again. Once we acknowledge what the experience was and we write down the facts and we objectively figure out what happened and what our hang-up is, then it's important to note what our experiences have been since then. Often what we do is we're focused on a ride, and I meet so many riders where they'll say, oh, I had a bad accident and I fell off my horse and I'm lacking a little bit of confidence. And, you know, we'll go through the clinic and we'll be talking and things like that. And no worries, Nav, see ya. You can watch the replay hopefully when you have better Wi-Fi. And we'll be talking and I'll say, oh, you know, when was the accident? And they'll say, 3 years ago. And I'll say, oh, so have you been riding since then? And they'll say, yeah, I've been riding for the last 3 years. And I'll say, well, what have your experiences been since then? And they'll say, oh, no, I haven't had any bad experience since then. I've been riding for 3 years, but I had that big stack, you know. And I say to them, well, how many times do you think you've ridden in the last 3 years? Which, even if you had only ridden once a week in the last 3 years, it'd be 150 times. So 150 good rides have happened since the bad experience, but we're still focused on the bad experience. And unfortunately, that can be conditioned. We're conditioned, I guess, to focus on big events in our lives instead of normal everyday events. So what happens is we experience a party or a wedding or a 21st birthday or a 40th birthday or, starting work or getting our first car. There's significant times in our lives when we have, we're conditioned to remember those experiences. And so as with the good, we remember the bad. And so the bad experience stays in there and we keep going back to that bad experience. We might have had 100 conversations with people about horse riding, but instead of talking about the 150 normal, uneventful rides that we've had, we always go back to that bad experience that we had. So it's really important to acknowledge, how long ago was this bad experience and how many good rides or how many good experiences have you had since that. A tool that I like to recommend that people use, and I've got a few people using it at the moment, is for them to make up something visual at home that they can use. Hillary, yes, I can see that you're saying that was true for Oscar and you. Hillary might share her story with some of you if you choose to ask her, but that was her situation, absolutely. What I encourage people to do is have a visual jar, or some people might, just have a bowl or a vase or a pencil case or anything that every time you have a good experience with your horse, you can write it on a note and put it in the jar or the storage container that you've chosen to use. I like to think of a jar because a jar you can look at a glance and sort of see it starting to fill up. And you can put, coloured lollies in there or marbles, or I know someone who was using dollar coins, and then every time it got to a good place, they go and buy something for their horse. But every time you have a good ride, you go ahead and you put that in the jar. So then if you do experience a not so great ride with your horse, you can go straight home and look at your jar and go, am I going to allow one negative experience to override all of these good rides in this jar? Or am I going to take all of these good rides in this jar and I'm going to let them override the bad experience because it feels like it's bigger to me, but really all the good stuff is well and truly beyond that one negative experience that we've had for some reason. So another question to ask is, what have I added to the story? So I touched base on that a little bit earlier. As you start to recall the story, there might be details that you find that you have added since that actually happened, and they might be good details or they might be bad details, or I don't know, but it's just helpful to acknowledge, what have I added to the story and how much more elaborate have I made the story, rather than just saying, you know what, I went out to the paddock, I saddled up my horse, a branch fell out of a tree, he kicked up, I fell off, I broke my arm, or I hurt myself, and it was a negative experience, but that was a one-off freak accident, let's move on from that? Or have you sort of gone, I knew that something was wrong before I left the house, and when I arrived at a paddock the horse was doing this and there was a funny look in his eye. How much more elaborate have you made the story? Because more elaborate you make it, the more you want to tell it, and the more you recount it, and the more you keep reliving it. And what we're wanting to do is acknowledge it and move beyond it. Can I manage it is another good question. So it goes back to what I said earlier. You might need to talk to someone about it. You might need to seek Nav's saying pineapple. You might need to seek professional help and have a conversation with it, so you are able to move past the situation and move on. Did you manage it? That's a really good question. I find that a lot of people that I talk to have had a situation, and I'll say, well, what happened? How did you get home? Someone will say, I fell off and I was in the middle of the bush and I was alone and I was 5 k's from home. And you think, oh, wow, that must have been really traumatic. How did you get rescued, And I'll say, how did you get home? And they'll say, the horse just was grazing, and so I ended up being able to catch him and get back on, and we rode back to camp. But they don't tell that bit, because the big traumatic bit is the story that gets the attention. And I don't mean that the person's trying to get the attention, but that, where we get validated through that story. I was in the middle of the bush and I fell off and I was stranded and I was alone, and it's this big dramatic story that we get to tell, whereas it's not as exciting when we say, I was out riding and I fell off, but thankfully the horse stayed there and I was able to get back on and ride home, and we were fine. That's not a great story. So our brain doesn't want us to tell that story. Our brain wants us to tell the dramatic story. So did I manage the situation at the time? If you did, fantastic. Let's go on. Let's move on. So once we've acknowledged it and we've done those exercises where we've written it down, we've had conversations with people, we've had a good look at the story and seen what we've added or what we haven't added, then we can start to work on what we can do from this point forward to move on from the experience and build more confidence and overcome our anxiety with the horse. So the first thing I like to talk to people about is what they feel is going to make them safe. So number one is the equipment. So in my business, being Horsemanship, I meet a lot of people that might want to be transitioning to hackamores or riding bitless or things like that, and they've had a experience, and when I talk to them, I actually discover that they'll say to me, I actually feel more confident with my horse in the snaffle, because when I bought him, he'd been ridden in the snaffle for 10 years, and I really don't feel like I can control him in the halter, but I really want to ride him in the halter, but really, I don't know how to ride him in the halter properly, and I feel safer in the snaffle. So my answer to that is ride the horse in the snaffle until you feel confident to transition over into the halter. I meet a lot of people, and it seems like a funny, simple thing to say, but I do meet a lot of people that have said, I don't want to ride my horse in a snaffle. The horse has been ridden in a snaffle for 10 years or 5 years or whatever it is, and they'll be riding around in a halter, and I'll say, how do you feel about that halter? And they'll go, I actually don't feel like I can control the horse. Because, that's a whole nother video, but our conditioning is you can't control a horse in a halter. And that's something that we need to overcome and prove to ourselves as well. It's something that comes through experience and knowledge. So equipment is something that you look at. If you feel more confident in a snaffle, go ahead and ride in a snaffle. If you feel more confident, if you put on a vest, I meet a lot of people that ride in, there's the eventing vests that you can use, and there's also a safety vest that has a little hook that hooks onto your saddle, which is an airbag kind of vest. So if you fall, the hook undoes from the saddle and the airbag deploys, and when you're landing on the ground, you're actually landing in an airbag. And of course the final one is a helmet. Now, I don't want this feed to turn into a big helmet discussion. And if anyone tries to start a helmet discussion, I will delete them. As far as I'm concerned, some people choose to wear them and some people don't. The reason I'm bringing it up is because I do meet people that maybe want to ride in Western shows or things like that, and they've got friends or colleagues that will see them at the show and they'll be putting their helmet on, and a colleague will say, oh, what do you need that for? That sort of thing. If you feel like you'll be more confident with a helmet on, you go ahead and put one on and don't worry about what anyone else says. So equipment is something that you need to consider. Experiences is something that you need to consider. So we spoke about getting a jar and putting those rides, writing out those good rides. So if you do have a negative experience, you can go ahead and open those little notes and say, oh wow, I do remember that was a really good ride. And that's a really, I personally like the note system, because you can actually open the notes and read and remember the good rides, and you can actually replace them over the top of the negative ride that you've had that day. So before you go to bed that night, you've read about 50 notes or 30 or however many there are in the jar of all these good rides, instead of going to bed thinking, I fell off today, I fell off today, I fell off today. Okay? Because this is the way our brains work. Training is another thing. So you can, I take on horses for training, lots of trainers take on horses for training, but if you're hoping to just send your horse away and get it fixed, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about training for you, and I'm talking about understanding where your horse is at. And maybe if your negative experience was linked to you pushing your horse out of his comfort zone, then maybe the horse needs to go to a trainer. But when I talk about training, I'm talking about putting the training into the horse that you need to make the horse safer. So that could be groundwork, that could be ridden work, that could be improving your relationship, that could be improving your communication, improving your trust, improving your leadership. All of those things come under that banner. Improving your knowledge, so through lessons, through skill building, through clinics, that sort of thing. If you're new and coming back into riding, or if you have had a bad experience, get out there and get under the wing of an instructor or a clinician or someone like that, who's going to support you in your journey and who's going to help you along the way. I want to talk now about our toolkit. So our toolkit is something that I talk about when people do my clinics, and our toolkit is all the little things that we know that we can go to in a situation, or it's the little things that we know that we can go to help our horse refocus on us, stop our horse, because that's probably the number one thing that I hear people talk about, is that they are frightened because they can't stop their horse. And if you can't stop your horse, you can't get off. So I have in my clinics, what we teach is 10 ground exercises, and those 10 ground exercises at the base level, at the foundation level, are what I call my pre-flight checklist. So if you're worried about riding your horse, or you're worried about getting on, those 10 things need to be executed at a certain standard before you have a green light to go forward and get on your horse. It's that simple. If your horse doesn't bend, you don't get on him. If your horse doesn't yield his hindquarter, you don't get on him. So when you have this knowledge, and it doesn't have to be my checklist. Obviously, there's people watching from around the world. It doesn't have to be my personal checklist, but get yourself a checklist that makes you say to yourself, I've done everything I can today to make sure that I'm safe and my horse is safe, and I'm confident to get on this horse knowing that I've done everything I can. You can never predict everything that's going to happen out in the world. You know, branches fall out of trees, kangaroos jump. If you're in Australia, kangaroos jump across a trail, cattle run. Anything could happen. But if you've done your pre-flight checklist, you can say to yourself, I've done everything I can to make sure that I'm safe and he's safe. Most people I talk to that have had a negative experience or an accident, they can tell me, you know what? That horse wasn't ready for me to ride. I knew he was nervous and I got on anyway. I knew that he wasn't feeling that great, but I got on anyway. I knew that he was tight, I got on anyway. Most people can say to me, I got on anyway because I had people waiting. I thought it wouldn't matter. I thought he'd be right, etc., etc., etc. The second thing that I recommend that people have in their toolkit is the one rein stop, or an immediate stop. So I like to recommend the one rein because if you use two reins, that can load up the horse and it can actually give him more power to bolt or buck or do whatever it is that you don't want to do. So the one rein stop, if you train that into your horse so it's in there and it's solid and he responds to it every single time, then when you're in a situation, you can go ahead and say, well, don't like it, one rein stop, I can go ahead and get off the horse and fix it. And I also say to people, don't be afraid of getting off your horse, okay? I was conditioned. I know plenty of you watching would have been conditioned. Oh, don't get off the horse because he'll win. That is BS. It is a lie. If the horse bucks you off and goes and eats grass and you're laying on the ground, then the horse might make a connection of going, I did this, and then the ride stopped. The horse isn't sitting there going, oh, I bucked and this happened, so I'm going to buck in the future. But the horse can make the connection if it happens on a repetitive basis. If I do this, the ride stops. He doesn't think, oh, she's laying on there, he is laying on the ground and unable to move or injured or whatever. Another thing that people say to me is, he broke my arm, he broke my leg. No, he didn't. He didn't. Horses don't understand that they're big and strong and powerful and 10 times our body weight and they've got the ability to break things. The horses just think, I was frightened, I reacted in the way that I wanted to react, rearing, bucking, bolting, and then it stopped. The pressure stopped. So that's why horses develop bad behaviours. The one rein stop, or a stop, allows you to get off the horse and do some schooling or help the horse through. Hi, New Zealand. It allows you to get the horse through the situation, get him to a point where you feel like he's confident and calm enough to get on, and then you can go ahead and get on him. Believe me when I say your horse doesn't want to go through the trauma any more than you do. He doesn't like it. He doesn't feel good when he's doing it. Your horse wants to feel confident. He wants to feel calm. He does not want to feel traumatized and that he has to bolt or he has to buck. Okay, it's not the horse winning or anything like that. Obviously, trained bucking horses are a different thing, but we're talking about our riding horses, and they certainly don't want to feel those things. Now, one thing that I do recommend, and this is starting, hopefully I'm getting towards the end. I know I've gone over again. I was hoping to keep it under half an hour, but I didn't manage to do it. So thanks for you guys that have stayed with me. I can see a couple of people have had to go, and hopefully you'll catch it on the replay. But I am starting to wind up and come to the end. And one of the biggest, most helpful things that I have found has been 100% successful with people that I've recommended it to is what I call my 100-day challenge. So again, you'll have to relate it to what your experience is right now and where you're at with your horse right now. But what I'll do is I'll talk about it from the extreme and go forward. So when I was on the Gold Coast a couple of years ago, I had a student at a clinic, and when we went through all the ground skills and she was fine and everything was perfect, and then the second day we went through all the ground skills again and all the horses were ready to ride, and we spoke about getting on and we put the saddles on and we did everything like that. And then I turned around and this lady who had said to me that she had confidence issues was missing, and her horse was tied to the rail of the arena, and I sort of looked around and I didn't know where she was. And when she finally came back to the arena, she said to me, I'm sorry, I was in the bathroom, I was vomiting because of her fear. She was that terrified that she was vomiting before, just at the thought of getting on the horse. So I gave her kudos for even being in the arena that day, because to be that terrified and to still be there trying and working with the horse and putting the saddle on the horse and all that sort of thing, was a really big thing for her to achieve. And so I created this 100-day challenge. And what I said to her was, when you go home, what I want you to do is I want you to go through the motions every single day for 100 days. I want you to go through the motions as if you are riding your horse, even if you feel like there's no way. Some of you will be able to understand the feeling of waking up, being ready to go out to your horse and just going, no, there's no way. I'm not doing it today. I'm not feeling it today. Some of us look out the window and go, yeah, no, the wind's blowing the wrong way. Yeah, no, it's a little bit cold. Yeah, no, whatever. My dog barks, so I'm not going to go ride my horse today. We start to make up all the excuses of not going out to the paddock. And so what I've developed in order to move past that anxiety is, what I want you to do is every day you get dressed as if you're going to ride. So you put your joggers on, you put your boots on. You pack the car, you put the saddle in the car, you do everything, or you take it down to the stables, whatever your situation is. You catch the horse, you groom the horse, you do everything that you would normally do. You put the saddle on the horse and you go through that every single day. Because what happens with our brain, and like I said at the beginning, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, but I've seen this so many times that I know what is happening. We're either getting closer to the couch or we're getting closer to riding the horse. And what happens is, when we first start developing that anxiety, is that moment, what normally happens is we've got the horse all ready and saddled up and we go, oh, I'm not going to ride today. I don't have time. I'm just going to take the saddle off. And then we might do that for, a couple of days. And then we might go, oh, I'm not even going to put the stuff in the car. Or we'll brush the horse and we'll go, I'm not even going to put the saddle on. And then we'll say, I'm not going to put it in the car. And then we'll say, well, I'm not even going to put my joggers on. And so we're getting closer to the couch, right? So what we need to do is go through all the motions and say to ourselves, I'm going to put the joggers on. I'm going to put the saddle in the car. I'm going to brush the horse. I'm going to put the saddle on the horse. Because all of those things, unless you've had an accident in regards to saddling or in those 4 categories, all of those things have absolutely nothing to do with your anxiety. Your anxiety lays with actually getting on the horse. But what the brain does is it starts the anxiety before what happens, right? So here's getting on the horse. This is where the anxiety started. Here's brushing the horse. The anxiety moves to here. Then the anxiety moves to putting the saddle in the car. Then the anxiety moves to putting my joggers on. Now I'm feeling nervous. Then the anxiety moves to even thinking about going riding today. Then the anxiety moves to the night before, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. So it goes backwards and backwards and backwards and backwards. And soon enough, we're on the couch, we're watching TV or we're on Facebook instead of going down to the horse. So it's important to lay the good experiences over and over and over and over and over again, so our anxiety starts receding. Okay, our anxiety is like a tide, it goes back out. So we've got control of that. So we put our joggers on, and the first day we put our joggers on, we might be, I feel sick. It doesn't matter, because you're only putting clothes on. They don't represent anything. Okay. And then you put the saddle in the car, and then you groom the horse and you put the saddle on the horse. Because what happens is you eventually, after a week or after 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, it doesn't really matter how long this process takes, your anxiety goes away at each of those steps. So soon enough, you're standing next to the horse is all saddled up, you're all dressed in your gear, and you're going, I've got no anxiety about this. So then your brain goes, maybe I'll just sit on the horse. So you sit on the horse. And you might get back off. And I've told people I would rather see you get on and off 10,000 times than not get on at all. Now, obviously here, if you've got a horse that is, you know, a troubled horse, then you'll be doing this in conjunction with someone who's helping the horse as well. Because if you've got high level anxiety, you can't be helping the horse to move past that, and he's feeding off your anxiety. Okay, this situation is for, although if he's just a little bit highly strung, this process is going to be really good for the horse as well. Okay, so eventually you're standing there and you go, I'm just going to sit on the horse. So you might sit on the horse and get off, and then the next day you sit on the horse and get off. You might do that for 2 weeks, and then after 2 weeks you might go, and I tell you, this is exactly how your brain works. You might go, I'll just have a little walk. I'll just have a little walk around. Okay, just one circle. And then the next week you go, I might just go into the big paddock and have a little walk. And then the next week you might go, I'll just have a little trot. And you can see where this is going. It builds and builds and builds and builds. And I can tell you that this program has been successful for multiple people who were at the stage where they were not taking their gear to the paddock because their anxiety started in the house. But because they were able to take that anxiety all the way back, eventually your body starts to become accustomed to that process, and so the anxiety goes away from each step in that process. So the 100-day challenge, I highly recommend it. It can be done with anything. So at the start of this video, I explained that Nikki had said that she was watching the show Jumping. So Nikki would start when, if she was fine doing flat work but she was worried about jumping, she would start by just walking around the jumps and getting to the point where that anxiety was not there, because your brain is going, we're just walking around the jumps, we're not jumping, we're just walking around them. And then the next week you turn around and you go, I might just have a little trot over a couple of trot poles, and then I might just do this and I might just do that, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. So this is how you start to retrain yourself and conquer, if you like, or overcome your anxiety. It's a very real experience, okay? So I understand that a lot of you, and I've spoken to a lot of you that have got people at home or friends or family that haven't experienced that situation before, that will say, oh, don't be ridiculous. Why would you go and sit on the horse? Why would you go and saddle the horse without getting on him? And that's okay for them to not understand. But what you need to do is have a conversation with those people and say, I understand that you don't understand. I need you to respect this process for me. Because otherwise, in 2 years' time, you know, if you're still following my page, you might send me a message and say, I didn't take your advice because my whatever, partner, son, friend, doesn't matter who, said that it was ridiculous, and so now I'm still sitting on the couch watching TV and my horse is still sitting in the paddock, or I sold the horse or whatever. So it's important to have a conversation with those people around you and help them to understand, and if they don't understand, at least ask them to respect that this is a process that you need to do for yourself and your horse to build confidence. So another thing to remember is don't compare yourself to others, okay? When you're comparing yourself to others, Tracy, actually showing the horse and entering the arena. Tracy, I will talk about that in a second. So it's important not to compare yourself to others. I meet a lot of people and they'll say, oh, but my friends are all riding on the beach, or my friends are doing this, or it doesn't matter what your friends are doing. Because you're either not going with your friends because you're lacking confidence to do so, or you're experiencing a ride with your friends where you're so terrified that it's not good fun for you anyway. So if they're good friends, they're going to understand that this is a process that you need to go through in order to move forward with your horse. Now, I do call it a 100-day challenge because it could take 100 days, which is, you know, just shy of 4 months. So it's not that big a time frame out of your life, but I can tell you that in my experience and with the feedback that of the people who have done it and gotten back to me, it hasn't taken 100 days for them to do it. So avoid toxic people. We all know them. Avoid people that push you because they think that they know better. Okay, you know what you need to do. You know which level you need to come in at this process with, and friends and family and people who care about you and people who love you will either understand or they will respect you enough to give you a space to do this process. If they don't, maybe you need to reconsider hanging around them. Obviously not family, but friends. Another tip for it is do have a safe space to ride in. So some people feel more secure in a round yard, a square yard, a small arena, something like that. That's another option, is to make sure that you're starting this process in a small area. So you're not, heading to the beach and saying, oh, I'm just going to sit on my horse at the beach, because obviously that's a really big area and you might feel intimidated by the beach. Another option is to find an instructor in your area that has a schoolmaster, a nice, safe horse where you can experience riding and going forward and all that sort of thing without worrying about your particular horse. That recommendation more goes for those people who have had a negative experience and you're still trying to work through it with that same horse. If you've got a different horse, then just doing the 100-day challenge is going to be fine. If you've got a safe horse where the negative experience was just one of those freak accident things, then go ahead and do the 100-day challenge under an instructor or something like that. But if you do have a nervous, flighty kind of horse, and I speak to a lot of people in regards to the canter when it comes to this sort of stuff, and they haven't cantered on their own horse, and I'll say to them, go and get a few lessons off an instructor that has a schoolmaster that will just lope around the arena, so you can go ahead and get your confidence in the canter before you try and do it on your horse that's an unknown entity. So that's another option that can help you build confidence in the gait or in just riding. If you haven't ridden and you're getting back into riding after 10 years, go ahead and have a few lessons on a schoolmaster, because then you've got a safe as houses or as safe as you can get horse that you don't have to worry about. It is okay not to get on, and it is okay to get off your horse. I know that there's plenty of people out there that will say, don't get off your horse, he wins. Don't worry about it, just get on. You have to be kind to yourself. I don't think you'd force a small child to get on their horse if they were worried about it. So don't force yourself to get on your horse, okay? That's really important, because if you force yourself to go through it, then what you're doing is you're putting anxious experiences on top of anxious experiences on top of anxious experiences. Like someone said when they said, if you fall off, is it good to get back on the horse earlier? And I said, if everyone's not injured, I think it is a good idea to get back on and wait for your heart rate to come down and your adrenaline to come back down. So if you're forcing yourself to get on your horse and your heart rate's up and you've got that knot in your tummy and you sort of walk around and you go, okay, I want to get off now, and you get off in that peak state, your body relates that peak state or that fearful state to riding. And so the next day when you go to ride, your body goes, what are we doing this for? We're in complete fear. This isn't a safe situation. So if you are going to get on, make sure that you get on and feel your heart rate's got to be down, your adrenaline's got to be down. You've got to feel like it's a safe space to be on. If you're getting on and off and you're still anxious, you're actually, putting that into your brain constantly and putting that recall into your brain. So your brain's saying, this isn't safe, this isn't safe, this isn't safe. So you're actually justifying that thought process to your brain because you're never coming to a point where you're feeling like it is safe. Okay, so I hope that helps everyone in regards to building your confidence and overcoming anxiety, that 100-day challenge. I just wanted to finish off the video. I just want to address what Tracy said in regards to the competition arena. And I do have a few people that ask me in regards to the competition arena. And because the competition arena, obviously once you get there, you've paid your entries, you've got to ride in there. There's not much going in to ride around and just feeling good and then hopping back out. What I say to people is the best thing to do when it comes to the competition arena, or one of the biggest tools that I use in regards to the competition arena, is visualization techniques. So if you're sitting at home, or you're waiting for the kids to get off the bus. I'm trying to think of times when you've got downtime. In those moments where you've got downtime, if you can visualize riding into that competition arena, riding in, visualize those judges and things like that, what will happen is our brain doesn't recognize or doesn't differentiate between visualization and reality. So if you can really put yourself in that arena in your mind, you'll probably start to experience the same physical, hey babe, you'll probably start to experience, I've actually gone longer on this one if you can believe it, I was going to try and be shorter. You'll actually start to experience the same physiological effects on your body. So your heart rate will increase, you might start sweating, your breathing might go faster, your adrenaline will shoot up, all of those things will happen. It's sort of like having a bad dream. You know what it's like when you have a bad dream, your heart rate's up, or sometimes you might wake up and you've been crying and it's just a dream, but your brain doesn't know that it's a dream because you're experiencing it. So if you can visualize, and some people are going to be better than others, but if you keep practicing it, it's certainly going to help. If you can visualize riding into that competition arena and feeling confident and feeling happy and feeling calm, then that's what is going to happen when you actually ride into the competition arena. So visualization would be my tip number 1 in regards to that. Tip number 2 would be what I was doing, because when I competed for the first time at the Cowboy Dressage Worlds, it was the first time I'd been in a competition arena in about 10 years. And so when I rode in there for the first time, I went, what are you doing here? It hit me where I was and what I was actually doing. And the nerves sort of set in and I had to just go, whoa, okay, you need to focus. You're here now. You've flown halfway across the world, so you need to get on with it. But then the next day, what I did was, because the way the dressage arena was, I was actually able to walk in there and go in there early, like before it started, and I was able to go in there in breaks and things like that. So I'm not sure, Tracy, whether you guys are allowed in the reining pen before you actually start, but what I would do every single time you're training, especially if you get to train at the same place that you go to competitions at, or if you go to clinics and things like that, I would allocate a little bit of time to actually riding in and visualizing that you're riding into the test. So then what happens is, when you're visualizing at home, you don't have the feeling of sitting in the saddle, you don't have the smells, you don't have the sounds and all that sort of stuff. So it's the start. Then the second thing is, if you can ride into the arena, you're going to have the smells, the sounds, all that sort of stuff, and your brain is going to start linking, well, I'm in the saddle and I ride into this arena. You're visualizing that judge is up there. You're visualizing that you're actually in the show pen. And then what can happen is, or what does happen is, your brain starts to replicate the physiological response when you're actually in the show pen. So Tracy's just saying we have an open pen during the show where all the riders can enter the arena. Perfect. So when you ride into that open pen, that's probably the best area to do that second phase, which is riding in and really visualizing, hey, I'm in the show pen, the judge is there. No doubt in that open pen, there's people sitting up in the stands that are helping the other riders or watching the other riders or whatever. There's plenty of other riders in the pen, that sort of thing. So you ride into that pen and you visualize that you're riding into your test. So when you put yourself in that mental state of riding into the test, then you can start to control and manage the response that your body has to being in that show pen. What else could you do? They're probably my 2 tips just off the top of my head, what I would do in regards to the show pen. Making sure, one of the really cool things that I tell everyone to do is when you do get anxiety is go through your 5 senses. So depending on how bad it is, and even if you're in heading into the show pen, I like to say to people as a grounding exercise, go ahead and touch base with yourself on your 5 senses, and that'll just bring you to the present and it'll give you something to focus on. That's not, I'm in the show pen, I'm being watched, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Actually, tip number 3, Tracy, would be to replicate shows at home. So go ahead and put even if you put one of your kids, you've got to tap into your imagination here. You've got to really go, that's not my kid, that's a judge. And then that's going to, like I say, override the physiological response that your body's having to on being judged. So go ahead and, pretend that one of your kids, or, maybe Jeff will sit up there for you, pretend that they're judging, and then you can start to manage what's happening for you physically when you go into the show pen. But back to the 5 senses. So when you're doing the 5 senses meditation is what I like to call it. You go through your 5 senses and make sure that you can recall, it might be one thing, it might be 5 things, whatever you think you need to do. It might be everything that you can see, hear, smell, touch, taste. So I go through that with wherever I am, and I'll say, okay, I need to ground myself. I'm getting anxious. What can I smell? What's 2 things that I can smell? What's 2 things that I can hear? What can I taste right now? What can I see? What's around me? And that just helps you to get present and center yourself so you can go on. So they are all the techniques that I use and the recommendations that I have had great success with people that have lack of confidence or that suffer from anxiety issues when it comes to their horses. And so I do have an information sheet that I can send out to you in regards to everything that we've spoken about tonight. I know I've gone for an hour tonight and I'm smiling because I had the full intention of going from 7 to 7:30, but some of these topics are just so big, and I love that you guys are interacting with me, and I really do want to address the things that you're asking me. So sometimes we do go a little bit over time. So I do apologize for that. But every Monday at 7 o'clock, I'm going to do one of these live shows. If you have any topics that you'd like to see me talk about on the Monday night lives, go ahead and send them through to my email, and hopefully I'll get around to talking about them. And so I do have an information sheet of everything that we've spoken about, and the tools and the tricks and all that sort of stuff, the recommendations. So please send me your email address if you would like to receive that in the mail. It'll be via a PDF document. And if you want to tune in every Monday at 7 o'clock, go ahead and follow our Tanja Kraus Horsemanship page. And if you're on Facebook at 7 o'clock, or if you get the notifications, everyone's so welcome. I'm getting all the thank yous. Thank you. If you will get the notification saying Tanja Kraus Horsemanship is now live. And if you're following my page, when you're on a computer, I don't know whether you can do it when you're on your phone, but when you're on my page, you can go ahead and touch on the follow button and click see first, And I've got like 100 see first, so it's not necessarily first, but it just is telling Facebook, I want to see everything from TKH. And so what will happen is that you'll get notified when I've put a post up. So I will always on the Monday morning say, hey, this is the topic for tonight. And then, you know, in the afternoon, I'll say we're going live in an hour, and then I'll do the 5-minute one, and then we'll be live. So hopefully you'll get notified and you won't miss any. So please touch base with us on Facebook, on Instagram. My website's horsemanshipforperformance.com. Don't forget to send me an email if you'd like this information sheet. And I thank you all so very much. I really do appreciate you following me and spending time with me. Thank you, Mummy. Mwah. Mum just sent me a big love heart. So I really do appreciate that you took the time to comment and watch and all that sort of stuff. So Leah's saying you can do it on your phone, so thank you. And I hope everyone's having a great time with their horses. And if you want to see me cover any specific topics, then go ahead and hit me up on my social media, and I will do the best that I can to address them for you. So thanks for joining me. I hope everyone has a great evening and a great week, and this will be available on replay as well. Good night, everyone.